Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So, Wrong Turn was one that you put on the list. Where did you hear about it? Had you seen it before, or was it just like from a list or something?
Yeah, so when we were just talking that like right after one of our podcasts for this season, and we were like trying to figure out like different styles of horrors that we wanted to do, and we started talking about doing this, like, what was it, Creature?
Yeah.
And so like I think I just literally typed in that, and it gave us kind of the list that we've been following.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if you had done this like based on the list, or if this was one that you had seen before and recommended. Yeah,
no, I hadn't seen it before. It was just based off that list.
Cool.
And it had like this and The Mist and what were the other ones? I can't remember. It's all kind of on our list, I think.
Yeah, the last few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't seen it before either. I had never even heard of it, actually. And in doing a little bit of reading about it, it's not one that like made a bunch of money or anything. So I was just kind of curious where it's a little bit of a deep cut, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I'll introduce it, and then you can give some facts, and we'll get to it.
Okay.
In 2003, 20th Century Fox released the hillbilly slasher film Wrong Turn. This movie revolves around the idea of cannibalistic, inbred mountain men in the isolated forests of West Virginia. A conveniently paired up group of 3 guys and 3 girls uncover something rotten deep in the woods and engage in a deadly struggle to escape with their lives. This movie was made on a budget of about $12.5 million and brought in about $29 million at the box office, despite getting generally negative reviews. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
They removed that. I couldn't find it.
Oh, really? How'd you watch it then?
I had it rented on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yep, every time I pulled it up on... No. I could have just been looking at the wrong place, but that was the only place. Even iTunes, you couldn't rent it on iTunes.
That's weird.
I was like, am I seriously going to have to buy this movie?
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. You could just make it up based on the IMDb.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so did you have any more success finding fun facts about this movie than you did finding the movie itself?
So, there were a couple. The actress that played Carly, I think her name is Emanuela something. Apparently, she hurt herself pretty bad during the. There's a scene we'll get to where they're going through some trees. She actually like legit hurt herself, like it basically like her shoulder kind of popped out of socket, I guess, from a fall. And yeah, pretty wicked stuff. The next fact I heard was that there's a scene where the 4 main characters are running, and Desmond Harrington, he broke his right ankle after landing on the opposite side of a log.
Dang.
So basically, these actors and actresses hurt themselves for this movie, which is relatively depressing. Sorry.
So you're not going to say it was totally worth it? Yeah,
no. This isn't The Departed we're talking about here. Yeah. So basically that was kind of it. There wasn't too many. I mean, there's a couple of other facts like that, it's like, is that true or not? Like, suppose this fact is actually kind of a shame, really, but this is the only film in the series that doesn't have any nudity.
Wait, in the series?
So there's Wrong Turn, like 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So you're saying, of all the sequels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep, and then basically kind of talks about there was facts like the people who wrote this kind of got the idea from another person who got that idea from another. Those kind of.
Yeah.
It's hard to come up with any original ideas, but anyway, so those were the kind of little facts about this movie, and it's not necessarily well known, and it's not. I don't necessarily think there's like a huge cult following behind it, so it's kind of take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's all I got this time.
So, yeah, and we normally talk about what the people who made the movie were trying to do and how well they did it. Yeah. And with this one, so in like the late 70s and early 80s, there were sort of the films that we think of as the slashers, right? Like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween. And then the 90s felt a little more like moody and psychological. So Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Silence of the Lambs. But in the early 2000s, it seems like there was kind of a resurgence of just like dark, gory escape from the bad guy movies. Like, a lot of people getting cut up and kind of just the dark filming and, like Jeepers Creepers and Texas Chainsaw 2003 and this movie and some of the others. So I think that this movie coming out in 2003 was very much a product of its time. I think it fit a lot of the other horror movies that were being made and being successful then. But I also feel like it didn't really break much new ground. It's kind of the tried and true formula of 6 young adults that find themselves in a situation where they have to escape crazy killers for like an hour and a half. Yeah. And the movie, like, I think there are other movies that are very similar to that, but that did it better. Like, they did something that was a twist or that made it more worth remembering, like Saw, for example. Because it just the idea of what was going on there and the mystery behind it kept you a lot more engaged with the story, and then the big twist ending. And then like The Descent I thought was an interesting one, because the ending I really liked. And then like The Ring was kind of the same way. So you had some other movies that I feel like came out of that same like time period that were trying to do some similar things, but found ways to be creative or to take a different turn or to do something that made themselves stand out from everything else happening at the time. Whereas I feel like this movie didn't have that thing. Yeah,
and I think it's also tied to like not everyone can be a Grand Slam.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So it's like part of me is like I appreciate the idea of this Deliverance type movie, but you just yet again it's. And I know I've talked about this touch base on other movies before, but it's like trying to figure out like, am I insulted by this movie for like the fact that it's like stealing, it's taking influence from other movies, or should I appreciate the fact that, of what the things that they did do, and but yeah, I think you hit it out of the park with your definition there. It just seemed like it was lacking. That's it. It was just like,
yeah. Like to me, it was kind of because like it's like a band where everybody in it's like a 3-piece, and everybody in it really likes Blink 182, and so they wrote like 5 songs that sound just like Blink 182 but not as catchy, and like that's not hard to do, and it's not something that you would expect other people to get really excited about because it's just like a worse version of an existing thing. Yeah. And that was sort of the analogy that I came back to with it.
Oh yeah. And plus like they say Keith Richards said in an interview once that don't take influence from one band. You take one influence from 20 bands.
There you go. Yeah. So. that's pretty spot on.
Yeah. Don't take 20 influences from one band. You take one influence from 20 bands. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. But yeah, so anyway, all that is to say, this movie, I mean, it was fine. It just wasn't remarkable.
Right, yeah. That's the thing. It was like, I mean, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't great.
Yeah. And there wasn't really any story to speak of. I mean, as far as like a big mystery or a grand reveal or anything, it's just people get stuck, they get chased. But I think or I feel like I actually learned more about the characters from the Wikipedia page for the movie than I did from the movie itself. But the Wikipedia page is also blatantly wrong about a couple like key points in the movie.
Yeah.
So that was kind of funny to see. But you really didn't get to know the characters at all, or have like a reason to feel any sort of sympathy for them or empathy with them. And everything else, like the camera work was fine. I really liked the overhead shots of the cabin that showed kind of how isolated it was. But I also think that with that, there were a lot of times where like the camera or the visual effects they were like distracting. And we talk about that being a big thing that's like bad, is you don't have to be good when it comes to special effects. You just have to not be distracting with them. Mm-hmm. And there were some pretty rough parts in this one.
Yeah, there was actually a few shots that I thought were relatively decent, but generally they involve like wide angles of like landscape.
Yes, yeah.
Which I just like in general. So it's like, that's a nice shot.
To be fair, I think like with the big shots of like the cabin and where all the cars are parked out there and stuff, that was like really elaborate set dressing. Like to set all of that up and to make it like to communicate what they were trying to with like the look of the place. There was a lot of stuff that had to be arranged, and I thought it was like really, really awesome. And the same with like inside the cabin, where you've got so much just stuff that's put there that all has to like fit the scene and the way they're trying to set it up. I thought that was one of the things that the movie did best, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with this movie. I feel like there were things that they tried at, like it. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like I was gonna say, it wasn't bad. There was things that, like, for instance, like selling all the cars at the gas station. Mm-hmm. Like there's like kind of little hints of what was kind of going on. Yeah. And so, like, it was definitely good ideas throughout it. I don't know, maybe I just kind of didn't want my hand held for an hour and 30 minutes. Yeah. Well, it never felt like there was a lot of mystery or anticipation to it. And there were a few times where it got kind of weird from a timing perspective. Mm-hmm. But anyway, a lot of times I talk about like where a movie lost me, and this one had several points where that kind of happened, which we'll get to after the spoiler warning. But for the most part, like the camera work was fine, the soundtrack was fine, but there just weren't things that stood out. But then where it really kind of fell short, because not every movie has to be this super layered, intense, deep mystery plot or anything. But for this one to not have that, it relied a lot on the actors selling the scene and creating the sense of urgency. And I had a really hard time judging, like, was it really, really, really bad acting, or was it just a really bad script with decent acting? Yeah, I can't tell you that one for sure. I don't know. It seemed like, because it kind of seemed like two of the main characters were like almost the exact same person. Just one was female and one was male. Like the acting and everything, like everything was almost stone faced. And it's like, are you just like a psychopath and like you could deal with this kind of stuff? Right, exactly. Or like what's going on here? But it's like, even they don't seem to be into this movie. Why should I be? Exactly. Yeah. But then again, like you said, like, was this just bad acting, or I don't know. Yeah, maybe they were playing the characters exactly the way they were supposed to. But that's true. Yeah, that's very true. Could be. Yeah. So anyway, I really do, because I know, like, it's really easy to say, like, oh, this movie was bad, this wasn't fun, I didn't like it. Right. So I really want to get into more specifics of like things that I thought where it fell short, in addition to some things that it didn't do poorly at. But we kind of need to be on the other side of the spoiler warning for that. Yeah. So before we go, who do you think would like this movie, or who would you recommend it to? Or if someone just asked you for a couple sentence summary, what would you tell them? So this is, I mean, you kind of touched base on this before, but fans of I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream, the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those styles of movies, like, this is right up your alley. Yeah. Like, if that's what you enjoyed, and it's okay to enjoy those movies for sure. I actually really like Scream, but it's okay to enjoy those
movies for sure, and it's kind of like one of the reasons why I have my tie to those movies, because I watched them, in the early 2000s in my teenage years, and it's tied to that. But just fans, if you like those, then you'll definitely like this movie.
Yeah,
there's no nudity in it though, so I don't know why anyone would watch it.
Temper your expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to me, I mean, it was just kind of a cheap thrill. Like, if it was in the theater that summer that I got to go to all the movies for free, then I'd totally go see it, and I'd eat popcorn, and I'd enjoy the experience, and then I'd walk away and not really think about it again after, probably. But for that time, I would enjoy the experience. So, if that's what you're looking for, here you go.
Yeah.
All right, let's play the spoiler warning and get to it.
Warning. Spoilers. This is your warning. Warning. Spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
All right, so I got a little deviation from the standard here.
Oh God, I'm gonna take it for what it's worth. I hate change.
I know, but this week, instead of just going through like scenes we liked or didn't like, I'm going to introduce a new segment, a new one-time segment, especially for this episode.
Okay.
And my segment is going to be called Places Where This Movie Took a
Wrong Turn.
I like it.
So what I've got here.
That's some production right there. I love it, man. Yes, dude. I'm in. I'm on board.
Okay.
And just for the record, for the people listening, I had no idea that this was going on.
True. Yeah. This is a little bit of a surprise.
I knew that there's like a little deviation, but I didn't realize that this was this. Okay, I'm in. Let's do this.
So basically, I got 4 chunks of this movie that I feel like are very specific times that my interest in the movie or my feeling of urgency for the scene or my attention were interrupted by something that was poorly done.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm going to read those out and let you react to them if that works for you. Okay.
So, bueno.
Cool. So number 1, opening scene.
Yeah.
The random newspaper headlines, I think, were a fine way to set up the movie. It's been done.
Surprising.
It's been done, obviously, and it's not like it's not like they were giving you evidence towards this large mystery, and then at the end something from that came back to make it all make sense or anything like that. It was what it was. It was fine. Again, I don't have a problem with taking things that other horror movies have done well and utilizing them effectively. But the place where this movie took a
wrong turn
I love it.
Was when they started mixing in all of the non-newspaper scenes. So the other pieces in that intro looked super low budget to me. Something you would have edited on your computer when you were first learning how to use iMovie on a super old Mac.
Yeah.
Just the quality of them was so poor, and they played no piece in the larger story. And so in the beginning, when you're trying to get the viewer hooked and pulled in, to just immediately drop something that low quality, I felt was a terrible directorial decision.
Oh, okay. Rob Schmidt. Idiot.
But I mean, for the time, obviously the technology hadn't come a super long way,
right?
But it was rough, and even if they had done it more like the filming in the rest of the movie, it could have been better. But I thought it was, first of all, unnecessary, and then second, just poorly executed. And so that was one thing to me where it's man, don't start off on the wrong foot. There's got to be somebody in the room saying we can do better.
Yeah, and what's funny is when this movie started and it started showing things like that, I was like, oh, I bet Daniel's going to mention that on the podcast. Because, I mean, it's something I noticed before, too. Also, here's the thing. If I'm watching a movie, I don't want to read articles. You know,
Yeah. Sarah's the same way.
There's a reason why, but this is also why Katie and I are the perfect couple, because she reads them out loud just anyway. Like if she were by herself, and so I don't have to read. Yeah. Well, do you think she read these? No, I don't know what they said. Oh, I didn't read them. She didn't read them to me. I just was like, you win some, lose some.
So for you, it actually was a plus for the movie that they didn't matter for the rest of it.
Exactly, yeah. I'm on board. But here's the thing. I didn't know they didn't matter until you just told me. So yeah. I'm glad.
Yeah. It all worked out in the end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so my second thing. Toward the beginning, when they're all together on the dirt road by the wrecked cars, they decide to go look for help, but the redhead girl and her boyfriend stay behind because that's how the first two people always get killed in horror movies. Yeah. Like, they're there by themselves, and then they start talking about drugs and sex because, again, that's how the first people always die in this type of movie. Tried and true horror movie trope. I'm okay with it. I mean, it's been done, whatever. That's not the thing that bothered me. The place where I felt like this scene took a
wrong turn
is that once the boyfriend disappears, the redhead goes and looks for him and then finds his severed ear on the ground.
Yeah.
But it looked so fake that I actually had to rewind the scene to figure out what it was supposed to be.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, we talk a lot about how, again, special effects don't have to be good. They just don't need to be so bad that they're distracting.
Yeah.
And I thought that this one was distracting enough that it really took away what was supposed to be a super dramatic scene. Yeah. Like, to me, if I'm sitting there wondering, like, wait, what just happened? What is that awkward looking thing on the ground? Oh, is that supposed to be his ear? That's not making the scene effective towards creating a feeling of suspense or horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I noticed, like, there was, like, the two earrings on it. But then I just got distracted by the earrings because I was like, oh, wow, those are a thing there.
That's a choice.
Yeah, that's a good decision. Not really. But, I think the thing is I think in that situation where they could have helped is maybe if they had like a close-up shot. Maybe they did. I just didn't notice it. But if they had a close-up shot of like him from the side where you could see the earrings, and then you knew yes. Like, okay, that's that dude's ear, and then people wouldn't have to rewind to see what's going on there.
Yeah, there could have been a number of things done to like make that more dramatic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but instead it was just like, okay, that I guess that was his. Like, I didn't see the earrings, but okay.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just kind of a good summary of how like a lot of scenes in the movie went, but that one in particular stood out to me. So
yeah.
All right, thing number 3. The 4 others. So there's blue shirt and yellow shirt and their girlfriends. The 4 others are exploring the cabin when they hear the cannibal hillbillies coming home. They hide and then wait for them to fall asleep and then try to sneak out. Which, in premise, on paper, not a bad thing. You know, It's like intense. There's a lot going on. There's suspense. I mean, it's a neat idea. But where it took a
wrong turn
was that it took them literally forever to get out. Like,
of the cabin?
After the hillbillies go to sleep, yeah. Like, Yellow Shirt's girlfriend kicks a can or something and makes noise, which is like literally the one thing that they're trying not to do. So why would you not be looking where you're stepping in that dirty cabin? But anyway, then Blue Shirt grabs the spring on the screen door in his hand for some reason. Hand. And I guess he was worried that it would make noise or something.
Well, it was making noise.
But like, why would grabbing it make a difference? It still has to expand to open.
Yeah.
And then it cuts his hand really bad, and he's bleeding a lot, and the camera's like all over that. And then like the guys wake up anyway, and then the cut on the hand just doesn't ever matter again for the rest of the movie. And they were going to wake up regardless, but they didn't wake up when she kicked the thing. So like, why did they invest all the time and dramatic close-ups on these things that made no bearing on the progress of the storyline. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, it indicates like a lack of vision for what the movie is and what that scene was supposed to be. Right. And it just kind of focused its time on all the wrong things. And that really annoyed me because, like, you have a limited amount of time during which to create like an emotional response in your viewer. And why are you spending your time on this stuff?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the thing is like you're kind of saying, the time that was, it was almost frustrating because the time that they wasted. Like, granted, the anxiety that they cause when you're trying to sneak out of the house when the guys, they're all right there is pretty intense. But at the same time, like, you could have done the same thing if they just bolted, like, open the door, just bolt and go. But there's a few things about this that confused me, and that is definitely one of them. Yeah.
All right, so we're on to the last one, and this is probably the biggest.
Wrong turn
of the whole movie, in my opinion. And like I would say, it's a thing where I just never recovered from it. Like, from this point forward, I couldn't take any of it seriously. And so Blue Shirt and his girlfriend, who, by the way, he's known for like 2 hours at this point, and he is with Yellow Shirt's girlfriend, get away and are deep in the woods, and they find a watchtower, and that's fine. They start climbing it, and the background forest is super CG and kind of weird looking, and that's fine too. I mean, like, I get whatever. But there's kind of this weird, like, flowery Disney music indicating that you should just, like, stop and take in the majesty of the animated trees.
Yeah.
Or something, and that they, like, focus on that for a minute, but, fine, whatever. Good CG is hard, apparently, especially in 2003. But where the movie really gets off course is when they jumped out of the tower and into the treetops, and then had, like, this extended slow motion treetop chase scene.
Yeah.
Which is a string of words I didn't think I would ever use in my life. Yeah. But it was just so ridiculous and unbelievable that, like, it reminded me of the newest Indiana Jones movie, which I generally prefer to forget exists, but where, like, Shia LaBeouf starts swinging through the jungle on those vines, and, like, the animation of it's so bad, the premise of it's so bad. It's just like, it's that moment when you sort of raise your hands and say, like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, who put this on film? And that was that moment in this movie for me.
Yeah, I had to think, like part of me earlier in the movie when they're sneaking out of the apartment, I was thinking to myself, like, oh geez, they legit waited a long time before they snuck out.
Yeah.
So, because it was daytime when they snuck out, and those people had slept. I assume slept all night. But then I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense that they have to leave at daytime because they're going to be stuck in some fucking trees at night. Yeah. And it's easier to hide how terrible this scene is in the dark.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
But yeah, that whole thing was just like, I mean, yet again, it was hand holding at its finest, I guess. It's just like, we can't just keep running. What should we do? Oh, let's have them run in some trees. That makes perfect sense.
Because that's how forests work.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, they got some real weird trees growing in West Virginia, apparently. So
they have stumps huge in the treetops. It's insane.
Right. But yeah, so that was rough. There were a lot of things in this movie that were just real rough. And I guess there were two scenes that I had positive things to say during. And I had to dig a little bit to get to this. But in one of them, it's when they're in the cabin and they hide under the bed and in the other room. And then the hillbillies come in, and where you see them, like, drop that roll of barbed wire onto the bed. Mm-hmm. Or on the floor, I forget which. But anyway, then he drops the redhead's corpse on the floor. And then they, like, start dismembering the body. that was a really intense scene because you're like, holy crap, how are they going to get out of this? Like, things got real fast. But then it cuts away to the far out shot of the house and then slowly zooms back in. And so you get the idea that time has passed, and you see the bad guys are asleep on their beds, and you have no idea how long this has been. But they kind of had to do some kind of reset there because they had amped up like the tension and the suspense of the scene like as high as it could go.
Mm-hmm.
But then they weren't ready to have like the big finale, the big conflict, the big, escape scene yet. So they had to do something to make it reset a little bit.
Yeah.
And there wasn't like another storyline that they could cut away to because everybody was just there in the house at that point. So by doing that and zooming out and then kind of slowly zooming back in, I don't know, I just thought that was a creative way to make that transition in like amount of tension in the scene.
Yeah.
And that's not, it probably wouldn't have occurred to me to do that. So I thought it was an interesting choice.
Yeah, I think for me, like with this movie, like I think we're, like I guess a prime example of my frustration with the movie is, the three main characters, I'm gonna say three characters, blue shirt and the two girls make it up to the radio tower.
Yeah.
And they're like getting blue shirt first aid because he got shot.
Yeah.
In the leg.
Yeah.
And even though that didn't really affect him, the rest of the movie is kind of cool.
Yeah, it didn't magically heal immediately like his hand.
Yeah. Anyway, so like this is the prime example is one of the females finds a radio and like pulls out the radio. You see the radio, and she says, "Oh my God, it's a radio." And it's like, yeah, no shit, it's a radio. Like you did not have to say that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yes, that's what you guys said that you needed to see if there was one in there, and you found one.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me that you found one. You know, and I don't know. So that was my. And then like with the radio itself, like they're talking in it, and then of course like when they're whispering in the radio, like it's being amplified. It sounds like it's being amplified outside, and it's like that's not how.
That's not how radio works.
Especially if you don't. Anyway, it's not a microphone there that you're. Anyway, so it was those little things that I noticed that kind of frustrated me throughout. There was also a few things that was just like, oh, that's convenient. Like a blue shirt guy running into the cop.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere. And
which
then
actually,
also, like,
I kind of like that scene a little bit, where he runs into the cop because they're like talking, and you're like, is the cop going to believe him? Is the cop in on it? And then he gets shot by that arrow.
Yeah. And
that I thought was like actually a pretty good horror, like scene from a horror perspective.
Well, yeah, because they didn't do so. It was the same thing with the gas station attendant. They didn't do what a few movies have done, where like everyone's in on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing. So like those, it genuinely didn't seem like those people were in on it, which I liked. And then obviously the cop gets killed immediately, but then like in the same scene that's cool where the guy gets like sniped from an arrow, which that's a good shot,
right?
Is like also equally frustrating because the mountain man guy, whatever, the mutant, like couldn't find him. It was just like, oh well.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like how far could he have gone? I don't know. I was just really hoping blue shirt guy died.
He had it coming.
I don't know. No. Well, here's the other thing, real quick. I would touch base on the thing that I knew that we were getting into a mess with this movie was when blue shirt guy ran into the car of the other group.
Yes.
Because it's like you didn't like what made it.
Because there was no like obvious turn in the road.
Right. And it was just like that's how you're gonna like combine these characters. Like you could have said like they were all together with him, and he was going to do an interview. Yeah. Like it was just instead you had to have him hit the car, and yeah, it disabled the cars, but so does running over barbed wire. Like
right, yeah.
It was just like that whole. So you have the intro, like people, mountain climbers dying.
Mm-hmm.
That's one, but then it jumps to him like in the car, and it's like that chunk didn't have to happen. So it's like you guys basically, you guys basically made like a 45-minute movie into an hour and a half,
right?
and you wasted my time. Like you could have made this a short, and it probably would have been pretty good. Yeah. But
in the studio, they call that filler.
Yeah. This show is all filler, no killer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that actually will segue nicely into our discussion for next week's movie. But I don't want to tip the cards too much on that one. So all filler, no killer. Except there was killing, but it wasn't good killing. So yeah. But yeah, I don't really have much else. Do you?
Well, for what these gents lacked in social skills, let's say social DNA, the skills that the DNA skills, social, they made up in like superhuman, not able to die genes.
Yeah.
Like these guys were just nonstop, and it's like scientifically you should die when you get shot in your spine with an arrow.
Yeah.
Like that was a perfect shot.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another frustration, because it went from like trying to turn this into like a horror movie into like the end of like a 90s action movie, where it's like we're gonna shoot the conveniently placed gas tanks on the back of the car and blow it up. You only have the one shot, and then like they're alive at the end too, like the same guy who fell from the trees that were super, super high.
Yeah.
It was almost exhausting. Like, this movie was almost just exhausting. I was just like worn out.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah. Same.
So here's the thing: if you want to watch a movie, you don't have to think about this. This would be one. It's just some of the hand holding throughout the film was a little bit frustrating, and it's easy to make fun of this movie because it's, they do it kind of to themselves. Doesn't make it right necessarily, but still they kind of do it to themselves.
Yeah.
So, all in all, this would be a movie that's going to play on like TNT or TBS for like the next 50 years, probably, and make a ton of money.
Yeah.
What do I know?
Hey. Yeah. So I think that wraps it up well, and we can confidently say that deciding to watch this movie is a
wrong turn.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening. Yeah, and that actually will segue nicely into our discussion for next week's movie, but I don't want to tip the cards too much on that one, so...
Striptease, boys.
For whatever reason, I can't... Maybe it was a question at trivia or something, but I remember having like a really, really long discussion about who wasn't the character in the movie Striptease. And I still don't know. Oh, was it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
yeah.
It was
my uncle let me watch that when we were younger. It was awesome, man.
So now that I think about it, I remember. So they do this like visual round at trivia where they have pictures and that are edited, and then a question that goes along with it. And it was, they had replaced people's heads with like animal heads, and they were trying to say like who's been replaced, and the theme was like cats or something. Like there was some reason why that was the theme based on like the date. But one of them, it was the cover for the movie Striptease, and it had like, the woman there, but it was like a cat over her head, and so it's like who's the person who you can't see, who's been replaced by the cat. And we definitely knew it wasn't Julia Roberts. I knew it wasn't Anne Hathaway.
Oh yeah.
So the whole thing just ended up being us like naming actresses that we knew weren't the person. Never came up with who it was. And
you should have just called me, man. I know.
Aaron
Grant. The character's name's Aaron Grant. He's played by Demi Moore. Ving Rhames is in it. Burt Reynolds. It's American classic.
Yep, came out in 1996.
Yeah,
but I actually knew that because it was in theaters when we were in Puerto Rico. But could not tell you who it was. So all that is to say, you should move to Austin and join our trivia team.
Wrong turn.
what is that from?
I made it.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
That's you saying wrong turn?
Yeah.
Nice, man. I should have known the keys.
Yeah, I looked up YouTube videos of lightning strikes.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah.
That's great, man.